Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. My name is Omar Shatila. I'm the Executive Director of Straight Path Academy. Having been a school principal for more than a decade, I thought I'd put this video together for those who are interested in starting an Islamic school in their own local community. The purpose behind it is to give an overview, so we won't be going into too much details, but just an overview of what starting a new Islamic school entails. Establishing Islamic schools is a very important part of strengthening our communities and our identities as Muslims and strengthening our faith. This is a communal responsibility. You see, Islamic schools develop and help raise the next generation of Muslims. As the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, that when a person passes away, their deeds come to an end except from three things. And every time I reflect on this hadith, it's amazing how Islamic schools fall under all these three different categories. Sadaqah Jariyah, ongoing charity, beneficial knowledge, and a righteous child that makes dua for you. And that's why it's important for us to have the right intention. As the Prophet ﷺ said, indeed actions are according to their intentions. Every person shall have what they intended. It's important to have the right intention because number one, we of course want the reward for this very important and valuable work that we're doing on the Day of Judgment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we must have a sincere intention for the sake of Allah alone. But also, having the right intention helps someone persevere and persist down this path. It will not be an easy path. It is not an easy endeavor to start and operate an Islamic school. It takes a lot of work, it's underappreciated, it has a lot of hurdles, and a lot of people who go in it for the wrong reasons or think that they're going to be making money off of it or want status or whatever the case may be, if they're going in it for the wrong reasons, they're not going to be successful and might end up quitting. So the first thing when thinking about establishing an Islamic school in your community is to evaluate and assess the need within your community. How big is your community? How many families and kids are active within it? How many masajid are around town? How many other Islamic schools already exist? Is this the first one in your town, or are there others that are already established? And if so, what's their enrollment like? Are they at capacity? Do they have a long waiting list? Or do they have space? Are they doing well? Are they providing a good quality Islamic education to their students and to the families that they serve? Or are they struggling? Do they lack resources? Is their enrollment dwindling? So all these things are important to ask and look at and assess when deciding whether to open an Islamic school in your area or not. Because if there are already Islamic schools in your area and there's no need for yet another Islamic school in your area, then joining efforts and supporting the current Islamic schools that exist might be the best route to take, rather than start a new school when there's no need for it. Part of assessing the need for an Islamic school in your city or your area is identifying who the competition is. Are there charter schools in the area? Are there magnet schools? Are there homeschool groups? What are the different options that families have to choose from? And what are the pros and cons of each one? Why do families choose each one over the other? And part of that initial research and assessment is running surveys and town hall meetings with your community members, with the families within your community, within your area, to gather input. This is important because number one, it involves the whole community in this project. Number two, it gets input and you can make better informed decisions with that information. It also makes everyone feel that they are involved. It makes them feel ownership over this project, that this school is also their school. It's part of their community, is for them as well. And also it's a way of indirectly marketing the school to your community. And it's an early way of advertising for the school. It puts it on everyone's radar that, hey, there's a new school project that's being worked on behind the scenes and it's being prepared to be launched. That way, when you announce opening the school, people already knew about it. People are ready to enroll their kids in it. It's not something new that catches them by surprise and then they have to learn more about it, start thinking about it. The second aspect, or a second thing to think about and evaluate and plan, is the location and facilities. Where are you going to open up the new Islamic school? Is it going to be under a masjid, or part of a masjid or Islamic center that already exists, or is it going to be independent from any masjid or center? There are pros and cons to each one, right? And that is an important point because it ties to governance. And, very briefly, some of the pros of being under a masjid or Islamic center or being part of that organization is that it's easier, much easier for the Islamic school to get started. You have support and access to the rest of the community. There's a prayer space for the students and the staff. There's also maybe other space that the school can use because, most of the time the facilities of the masjid are empty throughout the week, other than Fridays for Jumu'ah and, in Ramadan, maybe in the evenings for Taraweeh. But aside from that, most masjid space isn't utilized most of the week. So can the school use that space? And some of the cons that come along with operating under the masjid umbrella is that the school sometimes is just another project. It's not the focus or the top priority for the center's board. They might be operating weekend schools, health programs, they might be operating clinics, other programs, after school programs, Saturday school, Sunday school, other things. So your full-time Islamic school might be just another project. It's not the number one focus for the board of the Islamic Center, or might not have the priority that is needed and the attention and resources that are needed from that organization. Because running a full-time Islamic school is very different than a weekend program or a part-time program on the side. Of course, also it's important to keep in mind that the masjid's main priority and focus, as it should be, is the 5 daily prayers and the Friday prayer, the khutbah and the Friday prayer, and then Ramadan programs, Taraweeh, things like that. So the focus is on that. So there are pros and cons for Islamic school to be under the masjid's umbrella or to be set up independently and operate on its own. Again, that's something that you as a community need to assess and evaluate and decide which way to go. The other aspect of when looking at the location is trying to determine where most of your families that you'll be serving live, because you want to be close enough to the majority of the families that you'll be serving. Majority of students won't be commuting from far away, will come from close to the school and attend. Keep in mind that school commute is not even like a regular job commute, because when someone's commuting to work, they go there in the morning, they're there for 8 hours or how much ever hours working, and then they commute back home. When it comes to school, parents have to commute in the morning, drop off their kids, commute back home or back to work, wherever they're going. So that's 2 trips in the morning and then 2 trips in the afternoon, right? Picking up their kid and then going back home. So if a parent is dropping their kids off at school every day, those are 4 trips to school or from school that they have to make. And so it adds up. So a 10-minute commute for work might not seem like it's too far. 10 minutes each way, that's 20 minutes in total a day. But a 10-minute commute to drop kids off at school and picking them up, that's 40 minutes a day. It adds up. So it's important to make sure you're in the vicinity or close to most of the families that you're serving, because in my experience, the top 2 reasons why most people who are interested and want to send their kids to an Islamic school don't send their kids to an Islamic school or are not able to send their kids to an Islamic school are transportation and money, the cost of tuition. So those are the main obstacles for parents who do want to send their kids to an Islamic school. So make sure your location that you choose is in proximity to most of the families that you serve. Also, it's important to think when it comes to the location and the facilities, think about whether you're going to be buying a pre-existing building or constructing a new building. Are you going to be using portables or trailers to set up your school and start with something more temporary while you build a building or purchase an actual building? Are you looking to buy a pre-existing building that was already a school, or a pre-existing building that's not a school and change it to make it a school. So it's important to consider and think about things and how the school is going to operate within the facilities that you're considering. Is the school going to be operating in masjid facilities? Is it next to a masjid in separate facilities? All these things are important to think about. For example, where's the playground going to be located? How are students going to access the playground? Is there space for prayer, for assembly? Even think about outdoor spaces like parking and flow of traffic for pickup and drop-off. The next thing to keep in mind and think about and plan out is registration, compliance with the city, state, with federal laws, regulations, the Department of Education in your state, any local district regulations or requirements, local requirements, things of that nature. Now, it's important to note that regulations and laws vary widely by state. From state to state, you're going to find a wide variety of different requirements for private schools to be established in a different state. And the states are mostly what oversee and regulates private schools, but it is still minimal compared to their oversight and regulation of public schools. But also there's local health, fire and safety regulations and departments that you should be aware of and be in compliance with. Some states are more involved than others. Some states provide more support and resources than others and have more requirements and regulations and rules to follow for private schools than other states. So it's important to do your research. Where are you starting your Islamic school, in which state, and learn specifically for your own state and local requirements what the regulations are, so you're always in compliance with those requirements. States that have more funding for private schools or offer a state scholarship or voucher that families can use to attend private school tend to have some more requirements or some more regulations that the private school has to abide by. And that funding usually increases the level of involvement of the state or the local school districts in the private schools. So make sure you familiarize yourself with your own state's rules and regulations and to stay in compliance with them, and to know how to register your school, how to stay up to date with these requirements, and you're operating the school in a way that's in good standing. A good place to start is by contacting your state's Department of Education. The next thing to think about is funding. So there are two components when it comes to funding. The first one is the initial setup of the facilities and all the required furniture and things like that, and the textbooks, right? The initial setup. And as we said, you're going to be buying a new building, you're going to be using portables, you're going to be constructing a new building, all these things. So you need the initial funding for that to establish the facilities. And then the second aspect that is more not just a one-time fee or one-time expense like the initial one, aside from maintenance, of course, but the other one is the operating expenses, and that's an ongoing expense. So the first one is the initial expense for the setup of the facilities, or acquiring and setting up the facilities. The bulk of that is upfront, and then the operating expenses, which are ongoing. Things like buying books, purchasing furniture as your school grows, maybe expanding, acquiring more supplies and resources, payroll to hire the staff, etc. And so it's important to think about how will the initial operations be funded. A lot of times people think about the initial cost of acquiring the building, but they don't think much about the operations. How will the initial operations be funded? Because before you even enroll students who start to pay tuition, you have to buy the books, you have to buy the furniture and set up your classrooms, and you have to hire staff and teachers, and you have to be in operation before families start to enroll. Not too long before, but the revenue from tuition isn't going to be there before you start. And so you have to invest initial amount of funds in setting up in operating and launching your school program. Where will that initial funding come from? Do you have a budget worked out for your first year of operations? What's the expected enrollment? How many students do you expect to have in your first year of operations? What tuition amount are you going to set? The salary scale for the teachers and staff, how much you're going to be paying your staff and teachers, and the qualifications that you will set for recruiting and hiring teachers and staff. Keep in mind that payroll accounts for a school's biggest expense. For most schools, for all schools really, payroll is usually the biggest expense and accounts between 70 to 80% of a school's budget. For some it's even more than that, for some it's less than that, but it is the biggest expense for schools. And it's important to note that you should expect a deficit for the school budget to be heavily subsidized, whether from the masjid, from donations, from community members, from grants, from other sources other than tuition. Expect to subsidize and support the school's finances within the first few years, at least until the enrollment has grown to a point where the school income from and revenue from tuition breaks even with the school's expenses and the operating cost of running a school. And so it's important to have a plan for that, to make sure, at least for the first year or two, you have a plan in place of how you're going to fund that deficit. Because if you start a school and then you have a deficit and you weren't expecting it, you didn't plan for it, then the problem you're going to run into is operating a school program that is heavily underfunded, that doesn't have the resources or the staffing that it needs to be successful and to grow from there. So off the bat, you're starting off with a weak school program that's struggling, and enrollment is just going to die down or dwindle, and you're going to end up having to either operate a school that's struggling year to year, long term, or shutting it down altogether. So it's important to have a plan ahead of time to make sure you account for that deficit and to make sure the school is funded, has enough resources and funding to operate a good program, and so that will drive the enrollment up, and with enrollment going up, the revenue from tuition will go up, and then you're able to be self-sufficient. You'll be able to break even as a school program and not rely on outside sources of funding as much. Now, there always will be some additional funding coming from donations and fundraising and grants and things like that, some government programs maybe, but it's minimal, right? The bulk of the revenue for private schools comes from tuition, the tuition that the parents pay to enroll their child in the school. And part of setting that budget for the first year or two, it's also important to explore other sources of funding. Explore grants. Are there any resources that you could use or maximize or make the most of? Are there any other sources of funding that you're able to utilize? Are there any members in your own community that would be able to help out with that, whether with a interest-free loan to get started, and then later on the school might pay it back, or the masjid might pay it back to them if it's the school's under a masjid, or are they willing to donate to help the school get started? But it's important to explore all these resources and avenues to make sure you maximize the funding and the resources you have for your school to launch, because it does take a lot to launch the school initially, even if you're starting small and then growing, but you do need enough resources and funding to have a successful school program. The next thing to think about and plan out is the academic program, the curriculum that you're going to use, the resources for teaching and learning, supplies, the books, all these things. So you have to kind of plan out your school program and start off by determining which grades will be offered. Are you going to offer all the grades? Are you going to start off with just some grades? And which grades are those? Are you going to start off with elementary? Is it going to start off with high school? Are you going to expand to other grades? When will you expand to other grades? Things like that, just to have a tentative plan. Because, of course, some of these things might change over time. You might start thinking you're going to expand one grade a year, but then you might have more demand, and you might end up adding more than one grade a year, for example. Or you might start just with elementary, thinking you're going to expand, add middle school next year, and then high school, and then you see that there's not as much enrollment isn't growing, and or you have a lot of challenges, or you have challenges with staffing, with hiring, attracting, training, and retaining qualified teachers and staff, and so you might end up just sticking with a program you have and not expanding. So it's important to kind of determine which grades you want to offer and go from there. You want to determine which programs will be offered. Now, what I would recommend is start with one general program before adding specialized programs or tracks like full-time health programs or other programs. Start with one general Islamic education program for your Islamic school, and then you can go from there later on down the road. You also want to look at the state standards, the requirements, any local district, what are the public schools in your local district, what curriculum they use, what resources, what textbooks they use, things like that, and be aware of your state standards that the schools within your state follow, so that way you're aware of what program, what academic program you want to offer. Also do your research in terms of looking into the different Islamic studies programs, different Arabic programs and textbooks that are available, and are you putting together your own? Are you utilizing your own resource? Are your teachers going to be putting together their own kind of resources and doing that? Or you're going to follow some set program? All these things, again, there's pros and cons to a lot of them, and a combination of them usually might be best. But again, these are all things that you have to think about and decide for your own self as a community and plan it out from there on. And what assessments are you going to be using? What for testing to track students' progress? What resources? What furniture you need in terms of desks and boards and etc. And where are you going to source them? Where are you going to source them from? Are you going to buy new? Are you going to buy used? And where are you going to acquire them from? The next thing to think about is student enrollment, because as we said, enrollment is the lifeline for a private school. So it's important for you to identify within your own facilities the capacity for each classroom, how many students you can fit in each classroom, physically fit, safely, having enough space for them to have an environment conducive and space conducive to learning and teaching, where they're not too crammed, and it's not unsafe because you have too many students in the classroom, but at the same time maximizing the space you have, because as we said, the more students you're able to accommodate and enroll, the more funding you're able to then get for your own school and improve the quality of the academic program that you're offering. And you also want to get the capacity for your facilities as a whole. So for the whole school, what's the capacity, and per grade for each classroom, what's the capacity? You also want to do some marketing and outreach. Do you have access to a weekend school? Does the masjid in your area offer any programs? Are you able to reach out to the organizations in your community and advertise for the school, right? Try to recruit new students to enroll in your school. Share more information about your school, right? Do an open house or events, things like that, to be able to share with the general community in your area about your new Islamic school, and give them more information, get their information, collect contact information, interest, right? Initial interest, even though you haven't opened the school yet, but knowing how many families are interested in enrolling in your school. Again, it's not guaranteed, and a lot of times people will express interest, and not all of them are going to transfer to actual enrolled students, but it gives you an idea. It gives you a place to start when you want to launch your school, to be able to get more students to apply and more families to join your school. And as we said, because enrollment is the lifeline of a private school and most of your revenue will come from tuition, again, aside from a little bit of other funding from grants or government programs or donations and whatnot, but considering that tuition is the main source of revenue for your school, and it's tied to enrollment. So it's very important to make sure your enrollment is something that you're actively working towards to increase your enrollment, and then to also maintain your enrollment by retaining the majority, as much as you can, of your students from year to year. The next thing to keep in mind and to plan out is staffing, recruitment of teachers, and training, etc. So the first thing you want to start off with is identifying the needs first. How many teachers do you need? What grade levels and subjects? What admin staff do you need? For your administration, what are the positions in administration? What are you going to start off with? Do you need other support staff, custodians, maintenance, assistants, things like that? So you have to plan that out. Think, what are your needs, considering the program that we've outlined before, what grade levels, things like that. And then based on that, you will determine how many teachers you need, what grade levels, what subjects, things like that. And then the second thing, you want to set requirements and qualifications. What are you looking for in your staff? What are the qualifications that they need to have? What requirements are you looking for when hiring staff and teachers for your school? And then there's advertising and recruiting, right? Posting a job and the description, identifying potential candidates, maybe within your own community, and from the applicants you get, reviewing applicants and the applications that you get, reviewing resumes, interviewing candidates, looking at all the applicants that you have available, that applied, that are interested in working at your school, etc. And then making selections, sending out offer letters, putting together contracts for employment, planning those out and having templates for the job descriptions so you can post them, for the offer letters and contracts, things like that. Having those templates in place, that would help you with recruiting your staff and teachers. And then, of course, also planning out the orientation. Once you hire them, you need to do orientation for them and to train them, so that way you're all on the same page as a school and as a staff when it comes to operating your Islamic school program. The next thing is identifying and understanding the roles and responsibilities of the different stakeholders and constituents that are part of a Islamic school program. So of course, when it comes to governance, there's boards. So every school has a board that oversees it, that is in charge of its governance. And the board's responsibilities, think big picture and long term. Things like the mission and vision, formulating mission and vision for the school, of course, while gathering input from all stakeholders, from the families they serve, from the staff and the admin and the principal being involved in that process if they are at that point where they have the staff, or just in general from the general community and the families that they will be serving, and doing long-term strategic planning, financial planning. These are all board responsibilities. Setting major policies, approving the budget, and just overall big picture and long term. These are the responsibilities of a school board. And when it comes to hiring, evaluating, supporting, and firing if need be for the school principal. The principal is the only employee of a school board. The school board has one employee, which is the school principal. And the school principal or head of school, they report to the board as a whole, not to individual board members, but as a whole. And the board holds them accountable, and the principal or the head of school holds the rest of the staff accountable. So the principal or the head of school is in charge of hiring the rest of the staff for the school, all the other teachers and the staff and the administration members for the school, and overseeing them, working with them, training them, evaluating them, and firing them if need be. All this responsibility for managing and overseeing the rest of the staff and the teachers falls under the principal. They all report to the principal, not to the board, and the principal oversees them and is responsible for providing support to them, holding them accountable, and making sure things are on the right track, everyone's on the same page. That's the responsibility of the principal. And so, of course, the principal and the administration of the school in general, but specifically the principal or the head of school, is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the school. As we said, overseeing the staff and the school program, enrolling students, working with parents, etc. And then, of course, there's the teachers and staff, and every teacher is responsible for their own class, for their own group of students or set of students, and the classes that they teach. And then there's the parents. Of course, parents are responsible for supporting their own child and their child's learning and supporting the school as a whole. And then, of course, there's students, and the students are responsible for their own learning and doing their part, setting expectations for each group within your school community and for each group of stakeholders is very important. What do you expect from your students? What is their responsibility as part of their learning? What do you expect from the parents that bring their kids to your school? What do you expect from your teachers and staff, right? So you set the expectations, and so that way you're on the same page with all the different groups within your community. And of course, there's the general community members, people who might not be working at the school or have their kids in the school, but they're general members of the community, of the Muslim community in your area, and what expectations or what help and support you could get from them for your school. You'd be surprised how many within our general community are supportive or willing to support of Islamic schools, of our organizations and programs, whether in terms of time, expertise, resources, donations, funding, different, a wide range of ways or things that they can do to support the Islamic school or the masjid, and their willingness to, even if they might not have their kids in the school. So this concludes our overview of starting a new Islamic school. Inshallah, later on in other videos we'll cover what operating an Islamic school entails, things like daily operations, putting together a schedule of classes, enrolling students, policies, procedures, all the handbooks for staff and for parents and students, and all the policies in there about dress code and uniform and attendance and grades and absences and etc. And talking about grading and testing, the school management system that you would use for attendance and grades, and report cards, putting together a calendar, a school calendar, events, planning events, and training for teacher and staff, and professional development, what effective teaching and learning looks like, strategies, professional development, resources, and all this and more, inshallah, will be covered in separate videos and courses to come later on, inshallah. This is just an overview that will help give you an idea of what starting a new Islamic school looks like. So if you are thinking of starting an Islamic school in your local community, or if you're already in process of starting a new Islamic school in your local community, I'll conclude by saying feel free to reach out to us at Straight Path Academy for assistance and support. And inshallah, if you have any questions or if you need any help with starting your new Islamic school for your community, feel free to reach out, inshallah, and we'd be glad to help you out with that. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.